listen to your God. This is our motto. Your time to shine. Don't wait in line. Y vamos por todo. People are raising their expectations. Go on and feed them. This is your moment.
Are we good to go, Laura? Good afternoon, evening, perhaps even good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome everyone to this webinar where we're talking about the Leading Social Justice Fellowship here at the University of Toronto. My name is Nuwan Ashraf. I am just a stand-in for Lara Muldoon. We're just going to play a couple of tracks, and our partner, Lara Muldoon from School of Cities at the University of Toronto, will formally introduce our webinar and our program. So just hang tight. We're going to play a couple of tunes, and we will allow people to find their kind of groove, if you will, as we get started shortly. Thank you very much and welcome.
I want to break free. I want to break free. I want to break free from your lies. You're so self-satisfied. I don't need you. I've got to break free. God knows I want to break free. I've fallen in love. I've fallen in love for the first time. This time I know it's for real. I've fallen in love. Yeah. God knows I've fallen in love.
Laura, I think we'll have just one quick song and then we'll get started with our webinar. What do you say? Here's a banger from way back.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there.
Laura, over to you.
Thanks, Nuwan. Good evening, good afternoon. Hello, welcome everyone to the Leading Social Justice Fellowship information session. We're so grateful for each of you taking your time to be with us here today. My name is Lara Muldoon, and I am the Senior Partnerships Officer at the School of Cities at the University of Toronto. Today's session is hosted in partnership with a fantastic team from United Way Greater Toronto, School of Cities, and Rotman Executive Programs at the University of Toronto. You're going to hear more about the exciting partnership shortly. And I just want to say I am grateful for our partners in the spirit of working together in generosity and co-creation, for their trust and their deep belief in this program, and a belief that I share and we all share at the School of Cities. So before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that I'm situated on. Is Tkaronto, which means where trees take root in the water. And for thousands of years, this land has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to live and to work on this land. And acknowledging the land is just one way to express gratitude and honor Indigenous peoples who have lived and worked on this territory. And we at the School of Cities are committed to moving beyond acknowledgement and towards action, including Indigenous voices, perspectives, and ways of knowing in our programs and educational opportunities. We recognize that the weight of educating people and changing mindsets and altering actions cannot rest solely on Indigenous and racialized communities, and it is our collective responsibility and an imperative. And this program, the Leading Social Justice Fellowship, is an important way that the School of Cities community is moving beyond acknowledgement and towards action. And tonight, we're hoping that you'll learn more about this unique partnership and the team of collaborators behind the fellowship, about the kinds of solutions and cross-sectoral collaboration we want to support. And of course, we will be here to answer any and all questions that you have. And we hope that you leave tonight's session inspired to submit an incredible application and to share this opportunity with others in your network. Tonight's session is being recorded, and somebody did already ask if it will be shared, and yes, it will be shared with everyone who registered if they could not be here tonight on the School of Cities YouTube channel. We'll share that link. You can submit your questions anytime in the Q&A box at the middle of your screen. And we've allotted a significant portion of the session tonight to questions, to answer your questions. Closed captioning is enabled at the bottom of your screen using the CC button, should that be helpful to you. And I invite you to send a message to us at any time if there's something we can do to improve your experience or your participation in tonight's session. So now it's my great privilege to introduce Numan Ashraf, who is our academic director. He is the Associate Professor of Organizational Behavior at the Rutman School of Management and a faculty affiliate at the School of Cities. He's also the Managing Director of Innova Consulting. And Numan's superpower, aside from his excellent taste in music, which you've already had a chance to experience, and his deep love of food, fashion, and baklava, is his ability to enable inclusive and innovative practices with teams, organizations, and boards. He's served many roles at the University of Toronto, and most recently was the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the Rutman School of Management. Numan is a recognized leader in governance and has taught thousands of students and directors in the National Rutman Program on Not-for-Profit Governance in partnership with the Institute of Corporate Directors. And I will now turn it over to Numan.
Thank you very kindly, Laura. Colleagues, friends, partners, collaborators, citizens, movers, shakers, and those that are tired of the status quo, good afternoon. As Laura, my colleague, so beautifully and kindly shared with you, I'm a professor at the Rutman School, and I have actually, the real purpose that I have is working with all of the colleagues that are here today and others in helping to go from vision to action around a need of our time, which is leadership development. I fundamentally believe that leadership development can no longer be separated from the work of enabling equity and justice. And the reason for that, well, I think it's pretty obvious, but let me just state three really quick ones. Number one, I want to suggest that we've learned many things from the pandemic. One of them is that leadership is in a crisis of credibility. The preponderance and the obvious nature of privilege and equity makes it important for us to understand that all of our experiences are actually linked to what's happening in society. So in the next slide, you'll see, I think of this as being the iceberg in which inequity operates, right? What does that mean? What that means is that we have daily experiences of inequity, which many of us feel, hear about, and put up with. But underneath that, there are rules and norms that reinforce the systems and structures organizationally and societally. And even below that, there are global and societal forces that shape those experiences for so many across sectors. This fellowship is a call to action in terms of creating the capacity that we need to redefine what impact really looks like. So to me, the first reason that this matters, and this is important for us, is precisely because the moment calls for this. The second reason is that impact doesn't really matter if impact isn't happening across sectors. We need voices, we need insights, we need actions from the private sector, the not-for-profit sector, the public sector, citizens, communities coming together and saying that we need to actually co-create, reinvent, and perhaps learn from failures along the way. Insight number 3. Anyone who tries to suggest that leadership is something which is an approach to doing work in which everything succeeds is either naive or just plain lying. I think we want to create opportunities through the fellowship for us to step out of our comfort zones, sectoral, community-wise, personal and professional, and to create safer and braver spaces for iteration. Iterating on what is possible and moving from the possible to the probable. To do this work, we actually need to understand that all of us have power. And any chance that I get to quote Audre Lorde, I will, who reminded us that when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I'm afraid. If you are thinking about the fact that this is too prestigious, too fancy, too, I don't know, out of reach, I'm going to call BS on that. And of course, by that I mean bold statement. I want to say to you unequivocally, if you're watching this recording or you're live in this webinar, I want you to please take this invitation seriously. And this is an invitation. It's an invitation to really understand that all of us must acknowledge, address, and overcome barriers to equity. If we don't do this work now, we're only going to see return to back to the old days approach in post-pandemic leadership. That's not going to work. So we have learned through the pandemic that the good old days weren't so great for so many of us. And in order for us to do this well, we have to move beyond muscle memory to designing with, not simply designing for, communities of practice and those that are doing this work across organizations and sectors. Fundamentally, we need to recognize our privileges, and I want to just own my own in this conversation as someone who had the privilege of working within the University of Toronto, having strong ties to United Way and the School of Cities. Our team, and this is a team effort, is going to work with fellows and their groups in giving you the best of our thinking, all of our resources, and privilege in service of impact. Lastly, I want to say that fundamentally to me, leadership work is people work. And if you can't love them, you can't lead them. But also I want to say to you that leadership has to manifest itself at the personal level, at the interpersonal level, and at the organizational level. And this fellowship will give you a chance to learn about new frames and ideas, gain new perspectives and experiences, and to try them out in real time. We promise you that this is an opportunity for us to really co-create something that is special, but most importantly, necessary. I hope you'll take this invitation as sincere and timely and join us in this work. Save your questions. Over to Nation Chung from United Way.
Welcome, and thanks for being with us, folks, on this afternoon. I'll echo my colleagues, the great pleasure, this partnership with the School of Cities, Rotman and United Way. It is emblematic of the work that we have committed ourselves to individually as leaders, but also organizationally. We're at a point now, if it bears repeating, we're at a pivotal point now where there's a broader consciousness around the inequities that have been part of our lives and undermining opportunities for communities across across the GTA, across Ontario, across Canada, across the world. And at the heart of it for us as an organization is a concern about our social fabric, and that growing income inequality across our communities is compromising our trust in our institutions. It is raising anxiety. It has certainly over the last 24 months underscored significant mental health impact of those who struggle with living on low income or below the poverty line on a day-to-day basis. And that was made clear certainly by the health data that presented the impacts that we were seeing in neighborhoods across the GTA. And more recently, whether you look at the trucking convoy or go a little further back on that monumental day in Washington, where we are seeing greater polarization and hyperpartisanship emerging because people are fed up, people are feeling exhausted, people are feeling broken. And more often than not, history shows us that it is the folks who are at the bottom of the economic ring, and often folks of color historically that have been the fingers pointed to as the reasons why things are falling apart. And that has been the history of racism, certainly in our North American context. And so this Leading Social Justice Fellowship is calling on you, your colleagues, the folks who are in your circle, who are committed to social justice, but are driven in this belief in our social fabric and the opportunities to ensure that we don't strain this social fabric any further, but indeed come together in a unified way to preserve and maintain and sustain our social fabric. Next slide, please. So this is this call to action. This action that Noman has talked about starts at the individual and it moves to interpersonal and structural. And our work has brought us to a point in which we are further exploring the work that happens, the impact that happens when we work cross-sectorally, when we work at the intersections of change, and what it means for us as an organization, as leaders within organization, to look across those intersections of change and find opportunities. This is evident currently in our work in the Greater Golden Mile and the work that we are doing with corporate leaders, with the City of Toronto, Toronto Employment Social Services, and a network of community service agencies that are on the ground on a day-to-day basis, addressing the needs of families that are impacted by poverty, pre-pandemic, and certainly exacerbated in the last 24 months. And this type of partnership is promising for us because we recognize that while we have a valuable social service network, the transformation and the reduction, if not the eradication of poverty, requires that we work with public sector, private sector, and the not-for-profit sector. And so that is the core of this Leading Social Justice Fellowship, is fostering those interconnections across housing, health, employment, across corporate partners who are looking for new talent and helping them to think about how they recruit in equitable ways, bringing them into communities that can benefit from those employment opportunities, working with developers to really struggle with this housing challenge that we have right now, not just affordable housing, but deeply affordable housing for a growing number of people who are way outside the housing market and need other solutions. And so these are the types of challenges that we have set ourselves to, that we have tasked ourselves with. The work ahead of us is indeed, it is a personal transformation. It requires of us to think about our interpersonal relationships very differently, foster new allyship, and to simultaneously understand the big picture, the systems that contribute to the conditions that many of us deal with on a day-to-day basis in our respective professions, if not within our families. And with this understanding and this openness to new allies, this discovery, to really set intentional action of how we will be social justice leaders and how we will work across private, public, not-for-profit, health sectors to affect deep transformational change at a broader structural level. So I thank you for making time. I'm excited to meet all of you. I'm excited to work with you over the duration of this Leading Social Justice Fellowship. I promise you, you will be fulfilled. I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Sophie now to walk us through some of the logistics.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Nation. So Dan and I are have the pleasure of being project managers for this incredible program, and just wanted to talk you through some of the logistics behind the program. So kind of just to run through the arc of it, we start with a 3-hour kickoff on June 2nd. All of our seminars are on Thursday nights. They're all going to be online. And so we'll go from that kickoff into every other week. We'll have a virtual seminar. Those seminars are led by Newmont and Nation and facilitated by them. And we also bring in speakers who are experts in a whole variety of different areas to speak about their experiences as leaders, and also to add a little, smattering of subject matter expertise across different spaces and across different social justice issues. And in addition to this, part of this program, the idea is for you all to be working on a social justice issue and a project in your teams of 3 people. So we want to make sure that we're helping you progress on that throughout the program. So we have a couple of project-focused workshops. We'll have some small assignments and course materials to help you make progress on those things. And we also provide monthly team-based coaching. And just in terms of dates, Dan, if you want to go to that next one. Oh, and at the end, we have a really fun graduation celebration, and you receive a certificate from U of T congratulating you on your participation and completion of the program. So bi-weekly seminars on Thursdays, all of those are online. The coaching sessions are also online. If we can, we may do some optional events in person, but assume until it's otherwise possible and safe and accessible for people, that it will be online experiences. And so the seminars are 2.5 hours. We estimate that probably you want to be able to put in about 5 to 7 hours a week on the program between June and November, with a 6-week summer break. And that 5 to 7 hours also includes time for, meeting regularly with your team to work on your project, having some time on your own, either to work on project things or to do some sort of personal professional development and reflection time, and also those monthly coaching sessions.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Naman, and thank you, Nation. I wish I could also be a fellow in this program. I get so excited when I hear you all speak about it. And I'm really looking forward to being part of this on the team. So everyone, Dan Cowan with Sophie, program manage the Leading Social Justice Fellowship. So you might be wondering, you're here today, so I think that probably means that you're interested in this program. You might be wondering, am I eligible? Should I apply? And so as you've heard, as we've kind of talked about, what we're really trying to do with this program is about enabling and providing the resources and supports to social justice leaders, whether that's in your community or in an organization, to advance a social justice project that you've had your eye on, to make that difference and make that change. And so we're looking for groups of 3 and people to apply in groups of 3 with a community-based or an organizational-based issue or project that you have in mind on how you want to advance a social justice cause. We're really, and you heard Nation talk about the cross-sector fabric that's so vital to this program. While we encourage cross-sector teams, it's not required, but this is an opportunity to come and center around a common social justice issue, again, in your community or organization, and bringing together the unique insights from different sectors. So I'm bringing again together team members from the public, private, or community sectors to do that. This program is also open to independent activists that, again, are advancing a social justice issue that they're really passionate about. How do you learn more about the program? Please check out our website, and I think that many of you saw that there. On the website, there is a FAQ that has a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about. You might be wondering, well, what qualifies as a social justice project? What are those key commitments that I need to make to the program? What are some of the key tools and outcomes that you'll have from the program? So between the FAQ and the website, we hope to continue to answer your questions about the program and anything else you might be wondering on that website. And you'll see the link down here, and we'll also share that with all of you as well. There is the link to the application. And as a reminder, that's going to be due on Monday, April 11th at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. This is a little bit of what the application looks like. Again, we're asking everyone to submit an application in a team of 3. So what that means is that you're only going to be completing one application for your entire team. You don't need to do individual applications for each team member. Again, so you'll see here, it's a pretty straightforward application. It's a couple pages. You'll tell us a little bit about yourselves as individuals, give us your bio, and then talk a little bit about your project and what you hope to get out of the fellowship. And so if you have any questions about the application, about the website, or anything that you don't see on the FAQ page on the website, you can always contact us at any time at lsjf@innovaconsultinginc.ca. You'll see that here, I think if you can see my mouse, and you'll also find that on the website as well. And I am going to, so that is going to be the end of our presentation. We did want to leave time for a good number of questions here at the end, which I think I've seen many of them coming in here. Numan, so you good with me stopping the screen share and going over to questions?
That'd be great, because we got some songs to play as we get people ready with their questions. You know, I think my sense is that it's Nation and I that are going to start with the questions, and then we will get going. Just 2 of us, but Nation, you ready for this?
I got one. I want to let this roll a second here, but I got a question for you, Numan, in the chat here.
All right, let's hear it, please.
Hi, Numan. Can you please elaborate on the specific role Rotman will play in the projects we are to lead?
Yeah, so academic direction is really about thinking through constructs that we have around leadership, around impact. So I'm somebody who has an interest in 3 areas and spaces. One is social innovation. The second one is emancipatory leadership. And the third one is how teams work together, be they at the level of boards or executive teams or teams more broadly. So I think that those are, I think that the trifocal ways in which we overlap and intersect with the work of the fellowship. Rotman Executive Programs is also a partner in making sure that all of the infrastructure work happens. If I can warm call my colleagues, Sophie and Dan, the graduates, fine graduates, the celebrated graduates of the Rotman School of Management. But I also think that, I think of this as a management school, not just a business school, and there's a difference. I think that questions of our time require complex answers, but we need to start simple and small, and this is where the work comes to be. I also think that having the capacity to hold multiple ideas and iterations in mind is important. So I'm going to turn that over to Nation and ask him why United Way has chosen to partner with Rotman on this one.
I think fundamentally the answer to that is we have a long history with University of Toronto and the Rotman School of Business, and established a level of trust that created the conditions for ideating around the Leading Social Justice Fellowship. Additionally, we've built a relationship with Lara and her team through the School of Cities in real-time work, which was the precursor for the Leading Social Justice Fellowship. So I think it's important to start there, because ultimately this initiative, the Leading Social Justice Fellowship, this partnership is foundationally built on a common vision, a common belief in the urgency of this moment and need for change, and a common commitment to seize this moment to engage others as you have joined us this evening, and to create the conditions for leadership that will be transformative and necessary to take full advantage of this point in time that we are in right now. I could not think of any other institution that United Way could hold hands with in a commitment to community and shared values to provide a transformative experience and be transformed in it. So that's the reason why we have said yes to this relationship, and why we think, well, it's been evident certainly by the first cohort of the benefits of this experience for folks.
Thank you. I see a question here about, do we have access to university facilities or resources such as the library computers? Certainly you will get access to the library system through the University of Toronto. You'll have access to the same resources online that you have as a registered student at the University of Toronto in that way in space. With regard to computer, I'm going to pause and invite Sophie and Dan to speak about other resources, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I don't believe, unless Lara, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we can provide access to like a computer facility, but we do have, and I think this speaks to one of the other questions too, we do have two pools of funding available to individuals and to teams. So there's a needs-based bursary available to individuals, which is up to $1,500. And that's to reduce any barriers to participation in the program. So, the program's completely free, but we understand that, good internet access, like a functioning computer, time off from a job or a shift, caretaking duties, like anything sort of in that vein. And if there's something else, also please let us know. Like, we want to make this accessible to as many people as possible. So that's one pool of funding that's available. And there's also a group project stipend that's available. That's up to $2,000 per team. And that is meant to be used on like any materials that you need for your project. Last year, we also had teams use it to say, produce a video about the issue that they were working on or the organization that they're involved in, or to provide compensation to speakers at a conference, or provide compensation to community members who are involved in co-design. So there are some additional resources available.
I know we've sort of answered this question in the chat, but I think it'd be good to also verbalize it too, and maybe Nation, you could speak to it a little bit. I think that kind of speaks to the change at the intersections piece that you talked about. But there was a question, are team members expected to come from the same public, private, or nonprofit organization? And then there was also a version of that question, can a team of 3 be from different organizations as well? So I'm going to turn that over to you, Nation.
Yeah, absolutely. Unquestionably, we would encourage, if you have peers in other sectors who are focused on a common issue, let's just say you are in the housing sector and you have peers in the health sector, or folks in the corporate sector who are looking at these affordable housing or housing for all. we encourage those relationships. That's exactly the types of intersections we are trying to invite into the Leading Social Justice Fellowship. I think another question is, you don't have to be part of a registered organization. Ideally, as we look through the applications, we will be looking for folks who have a challenge that is actually part of their mandate, it's part of their job description, it's part of their expectation, or more broadly, it's part of an area that their organization is exploring. So we are looking for folks who have some direct influence within their organizations and the communities that they serve.
Numan, do you want to speak to, thank you, Nation. Do you want to speak to, we have a question about if there are any academic requirements.
Sure. So I want to tell all of you that as a professor at the University of Toronto at the Rothman School, I have an F on my first year transcript. I just want to say that to everybody. That's not the highlight of my academic achievement, I must admit. But I say that precisely because I think that if you were to ask me, Numan, in your 17 years of teaching, whatever, what have you found to be the best predictor of success in courses and programs that require for you to do three things: comprehension, extension, and application? I would say what I look for is the combination of sincerity and rigor. What do I mean by that? So let me be definitive. There's no previous academic requirement to apply for the fellowship. And this is a certificate program that is offered through Rothman Executive Programs and the School of Cities and United Way Greater Toronto. I want to say to you that the rigor of the program is no different than any graduate program that we have within the Rothman School in terms of how you're taught, what you're taught, and how we co-create conditions of learning. But to me, I think sincerity sort of feels like you're pitching this at the level where it is something that seems out of reach. Like, it has to be something that is not just aspirational, but something that you actually tangibly want to work on, right? I think that real innovation, social innovation, comes from our ability to tackle those big questions from where we stand in the world. So that is the requirement to move forward on sincerity. The second thing about rigor is to come prepared to each session, right? Share like you're right and listen like you're wrong. So come in with a perspective, come in with your experiences. And I want to say to you unequivocally that every member of the fellowship matters to the fellowship and they belong there. So I want to really encourage you again to consider this an invitation to bring, so come as you are and be at your best. That's my reminder.
Thank you, Numan. This is maybe an up for grabs question, or I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on this, but there was a question from Sanad about what resources would be available to us that would be offered access to, what materials and documents and support would be available to assist our project. So I'll sort of quickly say from the toolkit, kind of throughout the course of the program, there are sort of several tools, mechanisms, and rituals that really encourage and support your personal and professional development. And then also there's a toolkit that's oriented towards advancing your project. And so we'll have things like ecosystem mapping, project management tools that will come into play, and we'll have various workshops kind of along the way as a chance to dive really deep into advancing your project more fully. So it's going to be a combination of sort of assignments or sort of exercises that help you move these things forward, and these tools that are really about illustrating where you fit within the movement in which you're trying to advance, and sort of the mechanisms to help you advance that from sort of a toolkit perspective. But I'm curious, Numan and Nation, as you think about the toolkit, the rituals, the mindsets more broadly through this program that fellows will be equipped to, both in their own advancement personally, but also in the advancement of the project, what really comes to mind or sort of simmers to the top for you?
I'll start by saying that one of the things that became really apparent to us in the first cohort is in addition to the built-in supports that you have described, Dan, which folks can learn more about through by outreaching to Dan and Sophie and get some follow-up, is that we have such a tremendous network between us, the two organizations, and really understanding and linking people's ideas into movements that are already happening, that are already resourced. I'll give you an example is during the course of the last fellowship, there was a team that wanted to look at addressing health inequities, and more specifically looking at how mental health was responded to in community, how mental health as manifested by people of color was responded to in community, and the disproportional violence that was connected with those responses. And they brought that as the challenge to the Leading Social Justice Fellowship. What happened during that process was our colleague in the city of Toronto got a mandate to find a resolution for this issue and to think about alternative ways of addressing community crisis that would minimize the having to call the police, and more importantly, center it on community response. So in addition to, this is the answer to the question, in addition to the toolkit, the mentoring and all those supports, is access to these networks and opportunities that can be, that we can plug ideas that fit nicely into broader structural movements that are happening, and bridge those opportunities. Again, at the risk of overemphasis and being perhaps a little cheesy about it, it is at those points of intersection that we are honing in on and trying to really link grassroots movements to intentions, strategies, and resources that are lining up in broader structures.
I'd add the following to what's already been shared. I think that perfection is a myth and a mirage. And if we're serious about change, we need to stop chasing it. And at the same time, I believe that never give up on excellence when it's within reach. To me, that's how I think about this fellowship. I think that when our applicants, forget participants, applicants put together their best collective vision for what can be accomplished, and then they leverage the insights, experiences, and challenges that are in the room, virtually, of course, something magical happens. And then magic looks like this. It looks like people building on each other's ideas, people picking up insights and sharing. And I just want to really share that you have phenomenal coaches in the form of Sophie and Dan, who will work with you on your projects. And I really say this sincerely, not only because they're some of the best students I've ever taught, but they're really committed to this work. When we think about and I really say this because, you know, behind every project are incredible leaders who make it come alive. And Sophie and Dan are that for me. Lara is that for me, right? Sandy is that for me. Taslim is that for me. Nation's that for me. All these individuals who work tirelessly to advocate for you to be here. So be here, come.
Thanks, Numan. And I agree. You should definitely come. It's very fun. We have a great time.
Can we show them like what? Sorry, forgive me. Can we just like tell them like there's a dance party like every single time, like every single time?
There is a dance party, and there is a lot of great music.
The first man's name was Kiki. He wore such little pants. His brother was the champion, but Kiki loved to dance.
Okay, I'll start with the cheesy music.
Yeah, ask that next question now, Sophie, quick.
Yeah. So we have a question from someone who's wondering, drawing from your past experience, what makes an application or project stand out?
Is that directed to?
I think this is up for grabs. Anyone who, I think everyone has perspective on this.
Yeah, Lara, I'll turn it to you.
Okay, thank you. From our experience holding the program last year, and we also did a small pilot the year before that. I think to have an idea, it doesn't have to be fully fleshed out in terms of the impact, but to have a clear vision of the change that you're looking to create and to be able to articulate that vision is really a key aspect of a great application. You know, who are the people on your team, and can you articulate your superpower as a team and why it's important that you're working together in that small space. If you look at the application, you'll see it's not about your accolades or your education level or, you know, all of those traditional ways of thinking of, you know, achievement. It's really about your ideas and, you know, the capacity that you have to put those ideas into action. So I think be very clear about what your idea is and the impact that you want to have, and you'll have a great chance of getting into the program.
Yeah, I would build on that and just say two things: specificity and capacity. The more specific that you can be would indicate that for us who review that you have a working understanding of the challenge that's ahead of you, the degree to which you can demonstrate your understanding of that challenge, the intersectionalities embedded in those challenges, and then translate that to, well, why is this team coming together? And what can these three folks do to move the issues forward, to move the needle on the issue as you've described it? That's as simple as it is, but it's not always simple to do that, because I think folks try to squeeze a lot into an application, and sometimes we come across lofty language, and lofty language does not help. Like clarity, specificity, and capacity, just let those be your guiding principles as you're thinking about your application.
I'm really interested in hearing what Dan and Sophie have to say, and then I'll build on what they say, because they're the closest to the projects. Go for it, please.
I mean, everything that Laura and Nation said, I back 100%. I also think being able to show that you have like a real connection to the issue that you're working on, and relationships within the community space that you're working in, that's definitely a key piece that we're looking for. Yeah, Dan, anything you want to add?
I think maybe just like, you know, we're also looking kind of for a starting point for your project. So I think like the biggest hindrance in this work and in many spaces is just like not knowing how to get started or just not getting started. And so we want to see that you've sort of started to put that thought into like, okay, how are we going to begin? We know it's not going to be perfect. We know we're going to make mistakes along the way, but what is that starting point for us to really start? That's my favorite word, wrestling with these issues and tackling these solutions that we really want to advance. So I think clarity around, to borrow Nation's word, clarity around that and specificity around that starting point will help you in your application as well. And then to kind of borrow from Sophie's point real quick, the social justice is not something that happens in isolation. Part of the reason why we're doing teams of three, right, is because this is a collective effort, right? We want you to be part of teams and do that in a collaborative way. But we also know that your team of three in advancing this issue is not alone in doing that. And so how are you situating yourself within a larger movement that you're contributing to? And what is and so like Sophie was saying, connections now to those other people, organizations, teams, and how do you see that connection supporting your project and being part of a larger movement?
Can I just say, sorry, please.
Sorry, I was just going to say, because Sandy made a great point also, which is that your project it can be something new that you haven't gotten started on. It can also be something that is well underway and you've been working on for years and years. We encourage both of those things. And to Dan's point about the starting point, I think that's something that we talk a lot about in the program is like kind of toggling back and forth between this specific leverage point that you're trying to tackle and this systemic lens. So having an eye on both of those pieces is really amazing, and something that we'd be really excited to see, excuse me. But also that we understand that a lot can change over, especially as you get into this fellowship and you start thinking about what's your approach to leadership. So we want you to come in with a starting point in mind, but you are free to change that at any time throughout the program. And in fact, a lot of teams last year came in with a particular starting point in mind and kind of reevaluated over the first couple of weeks of the program. That's totally fine.
I'm a mindsets guy, and that having a growth mindset about your own learning is really important. And I think that this idea of moving from perfection to this, see these? Those are Post-it notes. You gotta have Post-it notes all the way around, right? And that's how I do my work, which is that every day I come up and say, you know what, this is the one thing I'm gonna add to what I've always thought about. And I think that, you know, that kind of growth mindset really can help you. I also think there's the beauty of structure and a cohort feel. That's really important, right? So you're committing to doing this. This speaks to my own kind of pedagogical bias, which is how I teach, but also my learning bias, how I learn. I have never once, not once, ever regretted coming to a class in whichever session I've ever taken, even where I haven't loved the content or the person teaching or maybe my peers, but I've benefited from making the choice and the sacrifice to be there because it showed to me that I committed to my learning. I really think that's something I urge you to, like, to me, continued professional development is an act of self-compassion. It's an act of self-development. So that's why I think it's important for you to think of those frames as you think about this. You're always going to make mistakes, but we're going to create the conditions for you to learn optimally from those mistakes as you're doing this program.
Thank you. Sophie, I think you asked that last question, right? I just want to kind of hot pursuit there because we were talking a little bit about criteria. You know, there's this question about, I believe someone asked how many teams are chosen and how are they chosen? So 18 teams of 3, I know we've answered that written, but I wanted to kind of say that verbally too. And the question of how they are chosen. So we just now kind of described the criteria that assessors will be looking at. And to give you a little bit more info on what that looks like, we've got a group of assessors. Some people that that you see here today will be part of that assessment team, as well as some people outside of our team. So some alumni from last year will be participating in the assessment for this program. And so we remove all the names and all identifying information from those applications. And each application gets reviewed by 2 assessors. And then we have a session where we go through those applications and make those final decisions. And so there's kind of a clear rubric based on everything that you just heard on the criteria here for your application that assessors will review and look at those things as well.
I'll just build on that quickly, Dan, and just say in our last cohort, we were very intentional about ensuring that we had cross-sector perspective. Mm-hmm. Yes. Staying true to the heart of the Leading Social Justice Fellowship, and that we ensured that we had representation from an equity and inclusion point of view, and that we will hold up and be grounded in those principles as we continue with the Leading Social Justice Fellowship. And so the folks who will be doing an assessment will be assessing, of course, the content. They'll also be bringing their lived experience to the process. They'll be bringing their sectoral perspective to that assessment process. So that is core to our principles in this partnership and the Leading Social Justice Fellowship.
Thank you, Nation. We have, I think, one more question, but please feel free to keep them coming in the chat and the Q&A if you have other questions. A question for Nation and Numan. Are we free to choose the project issues that are closest to our heart within the umbrella of the Social Justice Challenge?
This is how we do it.
This is how we do it. You have to, as I'm going to quote Sophie back to everyone else. She said, you have to have a real connection to the issues and to the communities. I just think that's the answer, right? Look, I want to say to every one of us, whether you do the fellowship or not, I hope everyone here has a healthy level of impatience with the status quo, right? And I just think that you have to bring that to the fellowship. It's kind of stating the obvious, but our successes are linked, and so are our failures. The same things that enable structural racism also enable structural economic benefits for a living wage to be withheld, for people's conditions around social justice to be challenged. People's rights for citizenship, people's right to voice and equity they're all. So, but we have to go from the diffused understanding of that to concrete examples that are then amplified through your effort. So you should absolutely think about what is the thing, two things, what matters to me most and what's within reach. Bring those together.
Thank you everyone for attending tonight. We didn't get to see you, but it is great to feel you in the room and to hear your questions and interact with you. We're really excited for your applications, and we got 3 minutes left. Any final words, final tunes, final...
Oh, final tunes.
Dance moves?
For those of you who don't speak Punjabi, that song is called Apna Sangeet. It says our song or our beat or our music hits different. I want each of you to bring your song, your beat, your story, your thing, because I think it's just gonna totally change it. And I also think that we can't do this alone, right? It takes 2 to tango, and as I say, 5 to Bhangra. So bring it, bring all of it. All 5. Hey, listen. I just want to say all of the love is communal here. It's Sophie, it's Dan, it's Linda, it's Laura, it's Sandy, it's Tasleem, it's Nation. It's all of the people that are here and not even here. So I hope that we'll see so many applicants that we get tired of looking through the applicants. I'm serious. Thank you. Sophie and Dan, over to you.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add. Just apply, please, and please contact me or Dan at the email we put in the chat. It's lsjf@innovaconsultinginc.ca, and it's also available on the website. Please email us with your questions. We would love to hear from you.
Spread the word.
Spread the word.
Yeah, if you know somebody that should have been here that wasn't, just let us know. Send them schoolofcities.com. It's right on the top of the page. You can click through to the Leading Social Justice Fellowship.